and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and what a great Thursday we have for you. And second hour, Jimmy will be here. We'll do open forum, play some groovy music, just like we always do. Is that right, Sarah? Some groovy music? Okay, we'll do that second hour. This hour, what a great honor and pleasure it is to welcome R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things. I'm almost certain you know what First Things is. It's the Journal of Religion and Public Life. I think they refer to it as a Journal of Religion and Public Life, but its readers know it's the Journal of Religion and Public Life. R.R. Reno, the author of several books, including most recently Return of the Strong Gods, Nationalism, Populism, and the Future of the West. Thanks for being with us.
It's great. I'm grateful for your commendation of the Journal of Religion and Culture and Public Life.
Well, I hope I don't know. I don't know who
all the cool kids are reading.
They know that, right? Yes. And I'm delighted by our topic today as well, because I actually, at lunch today, I realized that we need this conversation here at Catholic Answers a little bit. You can get kind of, when you're, I don't know what you would call us, professional Catholics, I suppose, in a way.
That's what I often call myself. Yeah.
You can get kind of mired in the the controversies, the scandals, the upsets, the strange things that were said here or there by this or that bishop, and forget to take a step back and look at the big picture. So today we're going to talk about signs of life for the Catholic faith. The number is 888-318-7884 if you'd like to ask Dr. Reno a question, 888-318-7884. But you were saying at lunch you really believe there are significant signs of life for the Catholic faith right now.
You know, we're living in a time of extremes. Polarization is a term that gets bandied around. And polarization means an intensified passion in politics, as people usually think of it that way. But it's also happening in our culture, and that means an intensified passion for people of faith. And so polarization that we're experiencing, and I've seen it when I travel around and talk with people, that people who were, they were going to church maybe but weren't fully committed, or maybe they thought they should go to church, but, they were the kind of typical Christmas, Easter Catholics. People are making decisions. They're making decisions. Some of the decisions are going against us. Obviously, formerly lukewarm secular folk are becoming more passionate and intense, and they put their signs. Many listeners probably know those.
In this house signs?
In this house statement of belief, the creed.
Yeah.
Science is real. I never really thought it wasn't, but hate has no home here. Oh, yeah, okay. So, And be that as it may. So that's a sign of their growing intensity.
Right.
But I think we can see signs of growing intensity of people in the churches. And I think that's going to bear very good fruit in the coming decade.
If you'd like to talk with Dr. Rusty Reno, the editor of First Things, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Here with us for the first hour, 888-318-7884. So maybe give us some of those signs. Like, where do you look for the green shoots? Where do you see them?
Well, I travel a lot for work. I'm here at the wonderful offices of Catholic Answers in San Diego, and I also gave a talk to a young adults group here in San Diego, and packed room, really heterogeneous too. I mean, tattooed people and pierced people, and as well as kind of what looked like a kind of homeschool crowd. So it was quite a mix of folks that wanted to come and talk about matters of the faith, and go to Mass first, and then get a presentation from a boring, broken-down old theology professor like me. And I thought, that's a sign of hunger. And, of course, the first step towards health is to know you have a disease. And a lot of people today are realizing that they need something of what, at a natural level, they need the fellowship that the church provides. But at a supernatural level, they sense that they need, the medicine of heaven in order to endure the sufferings of this world.
Again, the number is 888-318-7884. We're talking about signs of life for the Catholic faith. You used a phrase earlier in our conversations that I had not heard before, but I am fairly certain I'm going to steal: liquid culture. You talked about it, that this culture feels liquid to the people in it. And
Zygmunt Bauman, sociologist, coined this term in the late 20th century, maybe around 2000 or 2001, liquid modernity. That was his formulation. And the idea that everything is fluid and in motion, everything's negotiable. To a great degree, the web is a very vivid experience of that. We bounce from one website to the next.
Yes, right.
And on social media, we flip from one Twitter feed to another and one Facebook page to another. That's a sense that we're just swimming through this world.
Right, right.
And okay, so if we're swimming through this world, where's our home?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where is home base? Where's our anchor? Where's the dry land? And my sense is that even people who you would think, I was meeting with my niece here in San Diego, and how can I own a home? Who am I going to marry? Am I going to have children? These are things that people of my generation thought would just come.
Yeah.
You know, the place was a solid place that we lived, and you could mess things up, and people could be unlucky, but basically, it was it would take care of you in a certain sense. Very few young people believe that about our society.
And by believe, I imagine you mean not just as a matter of conscious belief, but they just don't feel it. They don't feel any solidity around them.
No, it doesn't mean no father in heaven, no father at home.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is, you see that young people in particular, maybe young married couples, maybe young single people, coming into the church, even preferring, in a sense, more demanding liturgy to the easier, folksy liturgy, because they actually are just looking for something that's solid.
Years ago, I entered the Catholic Church in 2004, and I struggled for 2 decades to remain an Episcopalian and ultimately failed.
I'm glad you did.
And when I was on the board of the Episcopal chaplaincy at Yale University, and the chaplain said, well, what's your recommendation? And I said, get as many candles as you can find and the most ancient possible liturgy. Why would any young person want to go to chapel if it's just like the seminar room or the dining hall?
Right.
And so people who realize that this liquid world lacks something, if the church is a contrast to the world, it becomes very alluring and mysterious and attractive, and it draws people.
The number again, 888-318-7884. Our guest, R.R. Reno, is the editor of First Things, the Journal of Religion and Public Life. Maybe over the years you've read great writers like Cardinal Avery Dulles and Richard John Newhouse, both now passed, but you're getting the good ones of this era as well.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, are we producing minds of that quality now, of the Dulles and Newhouse quality?
They were unique men. Father Newhouse was just a great talker. Wow. He was so good, and get up of course he preached, he was a Lutheran pastor before he became a Catholic priest, and just an amazing ability. And, Cardinal Dulles was a scholar's scholar.
Yes.
And had a great personal presence. Quiet man, but when he spoke, you listened because you always knew that what he had to say was considered, and he had thought it through. Are there a next generation? Yes, every generation raises up its own leaders and its own spokesmen and its own intellectuals. And one of the missions of First Things is to, publish them. We have done a series of articles by Angela Frank, who teaches.
Oh, isn't she wonderful?
Yeah, she teaches at St. John's Seminary in Boston, and she just has a real gift for explaining why, often really obscure, kind of outre, secular thinkers, why what they're saying speaks to something very real, but why they get it wrong, and then why our Catholic faith can get it right.
Again, our number is 888-318-7884. Maybe you're disposed, as I am, to be more attentive to the negative these days than to the positive. And you want to hear some about the green shoots for the Catholic faith. Where is new life springing up? And our guest, R.R. Reno, editor of First Things, says it is springing up and we should attend to it. Your call's coming up right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Unplanned, the true story of Abby Johnson.
I would be the youngest director in Planned Parenthood history.
She believed in a woman's right to choose.
I've had an abortion myself, so I don't have any problem with another woman making the same decision.
Until the day she saw something that changed everything.
Tiny, perfect little baby. And then it was just gone.
Now she's pulling back the curtain on the abortion industry. Unplanned.
Available at EWTNRC.com and the EWTN app.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Hey, right now we've got a free ebook for you. What the early church believed about the real presence. We're trying to do our part. You see all these Catholic apostolates and magazines and newspapers and all that trying to do their part. Because we all got the message a couple years ago. Catholics don't get the Eucharist. We don't understand it. We don't believe in the real presence. So we want to give it to you free. Just go to shop.catholic.com. What the early church believed about the real presence, free to you in its ebook format at shop.catholic.com. Our number is 888-318-7884. Our guest is R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things magazine, which is, how old is it now? Is it
30 years old.
30 years this year?
31 this year.
31.
Yeah, we were our first, we're going to be 32 years next month. Right, our first issue was in May of 1990. March of 1990. I should have my history more memorized. My goodness.
Well, Jen, the librarian here, is very strict about the copies of First Things. You better bring that back.
Yes, he puts them in a glass case.
She actually does have them in the case all lined up. 888-318-7884. I mean, one of the nice things about First Things, too, is it is a magazine where a lot of vigorous debate goes on. It's not a devotional or, it's not just an explanatory magazine either. There's been a lot of really good, solid debate over the years.
Well, one of my friends said, wow, you don't just publish things you agree with, do you?
Yeah, right.
I said, well, that would be kind of boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I already know what I think. I need to know what I need to think.
Yeah, right. It's a great, right. That's been a great service. You ready to take some calls? You want to?
Absolutely,
All
yeah,
right,
sure.
Let's go to Pat in New York, watching on Facebook. Pat, thanks so much for the call. Go ahead with your question for R.R. Reno.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. In May of 2019, you blew up the internet with an article from Sora Armani against David Frenchism, and I think that is the most important debate to happen, since Reagan. Or since First Things started. So could you explain to a Catholic audience what that debate is about? Because I try to explain it and people get excited about it, but they sort of get lost in the weeds.
All right.
Well, that's a great question. The debate has to do with the kind of culture we live in. We recently published an article by Aaron Wren, who's an evangelical. He distinguished between the positive culture, the neutral culture, and the negative culture. Positive as in positive towards Christianity. It's nice, it's good for people to be Christian. Neutral, hey, yeah, don't know much about Christianity. What? So, what's that all about? To the negative culture, which is Christianity is a force for evil in the world, makes people into haters. We all know what that mentality is. And so the debate between David French and Sohrab Ahmari really has to do with, I think, Ahmari's recognition that in a negative culture, a disposition towards coalition and compromise is going to fail, and that we have to take a more combative, frankly, approach to political and cultural matters and speak forcefully for the truths that we believe in. And the people on the other side say, well, but that just raises the temperature and makes things worse. And I think that I tend in the Amari side of this to think that you've got to fight the battles in the world that you're in, not the world you want to be in. And we're in the negative world where we have to speak as forcefully and directly as often the woke left speaks about, and to speak to these moral issues, not around them.
That makes sense to you, Pat?
Keep articles like that coming, and I'll keep resubscribing.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for being a reader.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks very, very much. Our guest is R.R. Reno. You have probably seen First Things. If you haven't, you really should. It's the Journal of Religion and Public Life. And among the things, when you say religion and public life, for example, that the kind of disputation between David French and Sohrab Ahmari, this takes place in the pages of National Review and Your Magazine and other magazines. So it really is not a Catholicism that is in a ghetto, but it's a Catholicism that's in the world in a very robust way.
You know, I look at, again, looking at the green shoots. Over the last 20 years, intellectual Catholics, activist Catholics, have really become an identifiable core of conservative thinking in Washington, D.C. A lot of evangelicals who go to Patrick Henry College or Liberty University wind up entering the church because they see that the church actually has a tradition of reflection on what it means to be a responsible and faithful citizen. And they also recognize that, the church has ballast.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Partly because we're not just an American thing. And I love evangelicals, may they flourish. May there be more of them.
Yeah, right.
We all need each other.
Especially at election time.
Yeah, especially election time. We all need each other. But, there is it's deeply tied to the American context, evangelicalism. Right. And I'm a very patriotic American. It's the only passport I have, the only passport I want. And but I'm deeply grateful that the church is a global institution because it reminds me,
right.
Hey, our political struggles, it ain't the whole story.
No, that's right. And I've always found that it reminds me in a very visceral way. And I don't know if this is, maybe in New York City you experience this as well, but here, certainly in California, if you go to Mass, you are in the church with the whole world. If you go to a Catholic church, I mean, it's not like some theoretical worldwide communion. Everybody's there. They're all in there.
Yes.
We're talking about green shoots. Do you see those green shoots? Or maybe you don't see them, and you'd like a little help from our guest, R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. I know I was invigorated in our conversations earlier today about having maybe a little more positive view about the prospects for the church in the near term. I've always had a positive view of the church in the long term.
Of course.
But the near term hasn't looked so good lately to me. But you say it's not as bad as all that.
Well, to back to that David French, Sohrab Ahmari piece and my observation that we live in a negative world. So the negative world means that we don't get no respect.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was that Rodney Dangerfield was that, I don't get no respect. And we're used to, as Christians, being the moral center of American society. We're being pushed out of that center. And that is all what we experience. And as an American citizen, I think this is very bad for our country. So I grieve that marginalization. But in terms of what I see in the churches is that this is actually galvanizing Catholics and making their church community more precious to them and making their faith more, forcing a kind of deepening of faith. But, I went to, I travel and I have to go to Mass, and you get the masstimes.org or whatever the app is, and driving along, and you got to figure out, okay, which one can I get to by 11 o'clock, and exit such and such. So it's totally random.
Right.
My experience in some churches over the course of the last few months. And I had 3 weekends in a row. I went to these churches where the where the priest gave really strong biblical sermons. I thought, whoa, wow. It's not your 1975 Spirit of Vatican II church.
That is a great sign of hope. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the goals of the council, was to restore the biblical fluency of the Catholic faith, biblical literacy, and biblical imagination. I often look to Scott Hahn as we'll look back, and he'll be one of the most influential figures in American Catholicism, because he led the charge to re-biblicize the Catholic imagination. And I think has had tremendous success. And, how can we not succeed if we have the Word of God on our lips and on our hearts?
Amen. Amen. Eddie in Orlando, Florida, watching on YouTube. You're up next. Go ahead with your question for R.R. Reno.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Very well, Eddie. Thank you.
So my question is the following. I'm going to preface it really quickly. Jordan Peterson has been talking a lot about the struggle of the hero's journey and how we as a society lack that hero's journey, that the meaning from without, searching for meaning outside of ourselves. Modern society tells us, no, the meaning is from the inside. And part of one of the things that we're talking about here is like celebrating possibilities and opportunities for Catholics. And so I see the part that I want to emphasize is that I see a lot of people complaining about like pop culture right now, how it's morally bankrupt and how it doesn't have meaningful stories anymore. So three questions in one. Question number one is, how can we Catholics take an opportunity to evangelize in the sense of that search for meaning that we're looking for our stories? Two, as parents, what type of stories can we tell our children, in the veins of Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia, that equip with the Bible and the stories of the saints can help us edify our children? And finally, what other ways can we help in this cause?
Well, let me just first explain to you how 3-in-1 works.
That sounds like a Trinitarian question.
Yeah, I don't think you get the concept of 3-in-1. But
I am so sorry.
But okay, I'll let Dr. Reno answer.
Yeah, it's the procession of the first question from the second.
Exactly, right.
I think, part of the popularity, extraordinary popularity of Jordan Peterson does speak to this tremendous hunger that especially young people have for this. What the term you used was heroic. Is that Peterson's term, the heroic journey?
The hero's journey, yeah.
The hero's journey. And of course, the hero's journey cannot be into himself. I mean, that's sort of not really going anywhere.
Right.
Although one learns about oneself, deep truths about oneself as one searches for that which is outside of oneself. So what would I say for raising your kids? You take them to a monastery. I mean, talk about a heroic journey. Wow.
Right.
You go to Clear Creek Monastery. I've visited outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, not only is it this fantastic Gothic construction that they're very ambitious, but the austerity and the beauty of the liturgy and the austerity of life. And it just sends chills down your spine. It is a heroic venture.
Yeah.
To cast your lot in the middle of nowhere with a small band of men. So I think there's that, or the religious life in general. It can be the active and not just the contemplative. It's seen by secular people, even who are unbelievers, as something extreme. And I've always thought that the renewal of the faith in the West will turn on the renewal of religious orders. It always has, whether it's the Franciscan, Dominican Reform, Mendicant Reforms, or the Jesuits and the Counter-Reformation, revival of religious orders in France after the Revolution. The religious are the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
And I think one of the promising signs is we do see renewal in a number of orders. But the women's orders, often the renewal takes place in new foundations, and in some of the men's orders, it's a renewal of existing orders.
To give you some ideas, Eddie?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Eddie. I was from our first encounter, I was expecting a bit more, Eddie, but
I've got 3 responses.
I know I bombarded. So,
but you were great.
Thank you so much for your input.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, I talked over you a bit there, Eddie, but thank you very, very much. Our guest is R. Reno.
But back to this, Peterson, just so perceptive. The without, not the within.
Yeah,
very important.
Indeed. We got some more. We got a couple folks on the line, but there's a couple lines open. So you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Our guest is R. Reno. He's the editor of First Things. And you know about First Things. Call up if you've got some questions about the greening of the Catholic pastors.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of Blessed Fra Angelico, patron saint of artists, and get a preview of the Sunday Mass readings. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
I don't know if we can do that. We have the editor of one of the finest journals in American life, and you're playing the groovy music? I don't know, Sarah. It's I don't know.
What kind of a groovy magazine?
Are you groovy?
Times?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, good. All right. So breaking news here. Catholic Answers Live. They're groovy over there at First Things. You're in Manhattan? Is that where the offices are? Or?
Yes, that's our world headquarters.
Do you feel safe there?
Oh, yeah. No, I think the news about New York is overblown. I mean, we got problems in the city, no doubt, but it ain't bad old days yet.
Yeah.
God willing, it won't come to that.
Again, our number is 888-318-7884. R. Reno, the editor of First Things, says there's some reason to have hope. I mean, of course, there's always reason to have hope. And we have Christ is our hope. But I mean, in the nearer term, that there are actually signs of a bit of revival going on in Catholicism. To me, you talked about the religious orders, and like certainly when you meet the women of like the Sisters of Life, am I saying it right?
Sisters of Life. They're based in New York. Their original foundation was in New York.
You feel like, Catholicism is going to make it. Like these are very first class people. But there's also this other thing about family life. I mean, are you seeing any revival of? I mean, really, the Humanae Vitae and all of that was not really broadly accepted. Broadly practiced. Are you seeing any more openness to the Catholic view of family life
among practicing Catholics?
Among us Catholics, yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, but let's put it this way: I was I was chatting with Brandon McGinley in Pittsburgh last year, got together, and, his cohort, 20-somethings now, sliding into their early 30s, they've bought houses in the same neighborhood. It wasn't like they have an official covenant or anything like that. It's just that, it made sense to me. And then I start to travel around and talk to other people, and this is really commonplace now, where people, they wind up living in the same neighborhoods, often kind of a little bit big families, a little more affordable, working class neighborhoods, and so they're building community. This is what people have recognized as one of the great failures of our late modern society, is erosion of community. So, and then Clear Creek, I mentioned this monastery. Lots of families have moved, and the abbot of the monastery told me we didn't really want that to happen. I mean, they wanted to. They're supposed to be away from society, but these faithful Catholics are coming, and they're building houses at the entrance to the to the monastery's grounds.
Yes, be there and have that community.
And then you go to front rural Virginia, and you've got all these Christendom college graduates who've come back and are living there now.
That is a hopeful thing, yeah.
You go to São Paulo, up by Thomas Aquinas College, same thing. Lander, Wyoming now with Wyoming Catholic College. So I guarantee you in 10 years, Northfield, Minnesota will have 200 Catholic families. That's where the new Thomas Aquinas College campus is located.
The very, very hopeful signs. You put me. I don't know if you know the Catholic Man Show. The guys there, David and Adam. I went to Oklahoma to visit with them and do their show. And here's these two young guys and their two young wives. You can throw a rock from one house to the other, and all these kids running around. And I'm glad to hear that that's a thing that's happening in more and more places. Yeah.
Steubenville, I saw it. So this, we're back to our thing about liquid culture.
Yeah.
This is sane people trying to recover sanity.
Yeah, wonderful. Anonymous here in California watching on YouTube. Boy, does that sound like atomized society right there? Anonymous in California watching on YouTube.
We do what we can.
I'm just playing around, Anonymous. Go ahead with your question for RR Reno.
Okay. I tuned in late, so it might be that I missed something. But in talking about the fluidity of the world, at least in big cities or areas around big cities, the fluidity of the world is right in the parishes. So it's kind of more like being a student at Georgetown than a parishioner at a Catholic church. And
do you mean?
I mean because people come, people go, just because people come and go.
Okay, I don't know how familiar you are with Georgetown. Maybe it's gotten better, but essentially it's kind of like Catholic in name only. And
you're seeing that in Catholic parishes. This kind of Catholic in name only, Catholic light, it's sometimes called, that kind of thing.
Correct. So, for those of us that can't pick up and move and build a house right next to a monastery,
right?
I feel way out of place at the parish. There's people that I don't think ought to be going to communion, and oh my goodness, you're pretty judgmental, and
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the number one rule. That's what I was informed of today by RR Reno. The number one rule of liberalism is thou shalt not judge. Thou shalt not judge. Yeah. But how do you respond to that? Because I know many people, especially in a particular place where the church is very, very sick, they really are stuck.
I agree. And, my heart goes out to you. Part of it is to try to find opportunities for fellowship with whatever fellowship you can find with the folks who do have a stronger view of the faith. And usually in most parishes there are other dissenters from the dissenting, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to find the dissenters from the dissent.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would emphasize again that my travels and experiences, it suggests to me that Catholic Light project probably reached its dead end a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
And I just don't see any. One of the places that my brother lives in Evanston, and when I visit, I go to Mass at a parish near his apartment. and it's a social justice parish, so it's not my style, to say the least. And they got a new pastor 3 or 4 years ago, and now they say the Nicene Creed, what they didn't before.
Oh, we were leaving that out, huh?
They were leaving that out.
Yeah.
And they had other modifications that were gone. And, and it's also, it is, for all of their political progressivism, they're pro-life.
Yep.
And so I thought, wow, so this is the new pastor of this church who's gently pulling them back. And there'll never be probably a place that reflects my views, or not never, but, it would be a long road. But that's the trajectory. And then I was in Marin County, it was the same thing. To go to a church, it was clearly a place that had really, probably been hollowed out with theological, Catholic light. And again, the sermon, I was really struck, like, wow, this guy is trying to bring back real faith.
Yes.
And so the era when the priests and other leaders were undermining, I think, is over, and we're living in an era of rebuilding.
Anonymous, does that comfort you at all, or did you want to share more?
I just wanted to listen, and I will just have to pray for a pastor like you're describing.
Isn't that right, though? And that's, I guess that's part of the Catholic life. But it's funny because my wife and I, we're in our parish now, must be approaching 25 years, and pastors come and go, and you see it's almost just like the tide coming in and coming out sometimes with
yes.
A wonderful pastor comes in, and they're all wonderful, man. We haven't had a bad pastor, but some that are that say the Eucharistic prayer the way it's written, and some that don't.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so you see the tide come up and down, but a general direction, the seas do seem to be rising a bit, I guess, to continue that metaphor.
Well, the polling that was done of, I think it's, I can't remember what outfit did polling of clergy attitudes.
Yeah.
And there was clear age cohort differences of theological conservatism versus liberalism, with the younger, more conservative. And there was a clear difference in vocational satisfaction, with the baby boomer clergy less satisfied,
yeah.
and these younger clergy more satisfied. So we're getting our leaders, the rising leaders, and also they know what they're up against. They have no illusions about, as I said, we're living in the negative world.
If you choose to be a Catholic priest now, you know what you're getting into.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anonymous, I feel bad. You sound a bit dejected about the things in the parish, and we will pray for a good, strong pastor to come. But I'd like to send you a book by one of our favorite priests. It's called Secrets from Heaven, Hidden Treasures of Faith in the Parables and Conversations of Jesus, from Father Sebastian Walsh. If you'd like the book, just hang on, because it is a beautiful book and a beautiful reflection on the words of our Savior. So you can have it. If you'd like it, just hang on and we'll send it to you. But we got to take a quick break. Right back with more with R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things, on some signs of life, some signs of hope in the Catholic faith.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Going to get back to more calls for R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things. But I do want to make you say into the microphone what we were just talking about during the break. But music, the music of the church, there are some good signs there. It's not all bad signs.
Yeah, I was the Mass of the Americas, which was Frank LaRocca wrote, and it was done in San Francisco, came to New York, and I went, and it was just fantastic. It was just so powerful. And, the church, we're living in a time when, there's so much ugliness, and the church is Bishop Barron really emphasizes this, that the ministry of beauty.
Yes, he does.
And where I go to church in New York has just a fantastic choir. We do all kinds of Renaissance music, and during the pandemic, when all the live music was shut down in New York, it was like a balm to be able to go to Mass and listen to these wonderful singers.
You get a little bit of a sense of like the medieval person who walked into the cathedral. This person doesn't have a radio at home. Can you imagine what it was like to walk in and hear the church music in the medieval period?
Yeah.
Let's go to Will. Oh, in San Francisco, where Archbishop Cordileone is, who is the patron of the Benedict the 16th Center, which was the commissioner or commissioned that work from Frank LaRocca, the Mass of the Americas. And then I think there's another one too. I think he wrote a second Mass for them.
Mass for the homeless.
Oh, I haven't heard it.
Requiem for the homeless, I think, actually.
Will.
And there's another one in the works.
Mm-hmm. San Francisco, Will, watching on YouTube, go ahead with your question for R.R. Reno.
Yes, thank you. My question has something to do, like when I grew up Catholic, but straight off the fast, I found my faith again, led back to the faith. But my question is, because the way I was reintroduced to the faith was through Christian, Protestant apologetics that I found on YouTube, and then as I progressed in rediscovering the faith, then I ended up with Catholic Answers and was led further into Catholicism. My question is, I see for some reason, maybe it's because the culture that they find Protestantism more approachable, and that's my opinion. And for example, my wife is going through that process, but sometimes now we will be in a situation where there's doctrine that we differ on. So I don't know if I should let her naturally progress in discovering the Catholic faith, or should go ahead and just start questioning her or sharing the Catholic point of view. I think the important thing is to come to Jesus, as far as I understand.
You should be grateful. Yes, if you're united in faith in that regard, that's a great blessing. And then to offer encouragement, to consider the riches of the Catholic faith would be a way of enriching that unity in Christ.
Will, would you like me to send you our book, Why We're Catholic? Maybe just it's something that you could read, and if there's points that you might like to share with your wife, that might be one thing you could do. If you'd like a copy, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Yeah, sure, that would be great.
All right. Well, many blessings for you and your wife. You sound like a beautiful pair, and I hope that I think you got some good advice there from R.R. Reno. I mean, I have to say I have personal experience of this. My wife and I were, as they say, of disparity of cult when we were married, and looking back on it, the only thing I regret, I tell these people all the time, is that I wasn't just more trusting and patient. So I will recommend that very highly. You trust in the Lord, lots of patience, and the two of you will come to where He wants you. But hang on, we'll send you a copy of that book. The number is 888-318-7884. We got time to get more on if you would like to call. We're talking about signs of hope in the Catholic faith. R.R. Reno has a particularly good position from which to assess the condition of the church. Travels a lot, deals with writers and producers of content from all around the world, and says, actually, don't be too down on it. There's some things that we can really celebrate these days. Some things. You want to give us any more? Anything else that you got in mind?
There's broad cultural trends that also we should think about. In other words, people seeking solid ground.
Yeah.
And in the political sphere, build a wall. I always tell people I can, if you tell me what your view is on transgenderism, I can tell you what your view is on the
build a wall.
Build a wall.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
But
I can tell
you're
you what your view is in general on immigration, actually.
Right.
Because the boundary between a man and a woman is it's not the same. Obviously, boundary between countries are arbitrary, but the notion of boundaries, the notion that there are differences, the notion that we have to respect boundaries, is it runs like a red thread through all kinds of these cultural debates, actually.
Yeah, it does. It seems that we find proxies for, it really seems to me that we are in a time of very base level kind of questions. Like the questions are actually at the very root,
Yes.
but we find proxies to have these debates.
It's natural, I think. Yeah, I think in politics, the wall, that really was a proxy for, I'm going to protect you.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm going to expose you to global competition for your job or what have you. And then, so what about this? What about the feeling of we need to build a wall between the church and the world? And I think that, I can tell you sort of what your theology is on the basis of whether you want a communion rail or not. Right? So do you fence the sanctuary from the church? And that says a lot about what your theology of the Eucharist is all about, and the great difference between God and man, the great vast gulf between God and man. And so rebuilding the walls, the sense of the church as a sacred space, the sense of the church as having its own life separate from the world. I often tell clergy, you have to be ruthlessly disciplined about never letting therapeutic language into your homilies, because that's the language of the world. Should use the language of our tradition to describe the kinds of challenges we face, and also the kinds of way forward. How do we make our way forward in life? Don't ever talk about healthy choices.
No.
That's
right.
the ultimate
talk about
therapeutic.
Virtues and talk about...
Yes, virtues.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So then we get the caller, I have to say, and this is quite, and I actually feel quite sympathetic to this caller. I feel so discouraged. When and now you might think I'm silly what I'm about to say, but I feel so discouraged when I see what the German bishops are up to. And I've never been to Germany. But still...
It's not a healthy society.
I think that many people, we have access to all this news about global Catholicism. We see the Pachamama thing. We see the synodal path, which I don't even think is a synod. I don't even know what that is going on in Germany. And you just have this sense of being deflated, like the war is over.
It may be over in Germany.
Oh, well, thanks for cheering me up.
I mean, it's a country. It's the culture in Germany. I've been to Germany many times. They don't have children. 18% of Germans have said that they'll fight for their own country.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy place, and so the church is not healthy there, and that's not surprising. But then pop across the Baltic and go to Norway, and the missionary bishop of Norway, Erik Varden, who used to be abbot of a Benedictine monastery in England, but it's Norwegian, and go to his website. It's
really?
Like, wow, yeah, this is a man who's all preaching, doing ministry it's after the neutron bomb of secularism has exploded in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
And it's just powerful, beautiful, theologically rich, orthodox. We're finding new leaders, actually, in this time. And that's not a bad thing.
I was joking about France one day about how France, and it's kind of a bitter joke, but had kind of lost the Catholic faith. And someone who had been in France said, "Don't be so sure."
Oh no, I'm with you on
that.
France has a very, very strong core of prosperous kind of what we call them sort of middle class Catholic constituency. That's quite strong. I mean, some of the parishes in Paris are overflowing with people.
That's just wonderful to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's good for the counter narrative too.
About 10% of the French population are regular mass goers, but they're quite devoted. So there's a foundation there to build upon, and that whereas the German situation is much more dire.
Let's go to Bob in Dallas, Texas, listening on 9:10 a.m. I'm sure that's got to be Guadalupe Radio. Bob, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for R.R. Reno.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I heard you guys just mention Bishop Barron. I'm actually calling from Dallas. We have our institute here with Bishop Barron. But my question is actually about the kind of debates on liberalism and integralism. I just want to hear your thoughts on that, because I'm frankly quite confused, and sometimes I don't know what the integralists really want. And I just thought, I remember seeing you at the New Polity, and you had some thoughts there, but I just kind of wanted to hear if you had a take on it, because First Things is doing something really interesting in which you're allowing some of these, integralist voices to be heard. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
We're all sensing that all of us sense that. I wrote a book, Return of the Strong Gods, about the end of the post-war era, post-war meaning post-World War II. The fact that I have to specify that tells you how much it's ending. But we all sense we're at the end of a period, and the old truisms are no longer true. And the John Courtney Murray argument for the compatibility or the proper Catholic loyalty to the American project. I think some of those arguments still stand. You can look back and reread. We hold these truths and say, "Wow, if he knew about the woke stuff, I don't think he'd be quite so optimistic."
Right.
So we all sense that it's more, and that's why the integralism position it gets our attention, and we think, "Okay, well, so what is the way forward?" And I agree. I find what the integralists want is very muddy, and this debate, liberalism versus integralism, is kind of a lot of heat and not much light. But people are sensing that a need for us as Catholics to rethink our political loyalties and our political witness.
Bob, what do you think?
No, that's great. Yeah, my wife's from Poland, and it's just interesting to learn the history of political thought there. And so I'm just glad this debate is actually opening up a kind of a different way of thinking, because I grew up just thinking that the American way of thought was the way forward, and meaning like liberalism, including all of the various branches. But I think that posing the question, which the integralists are doing, is important. So thank you for.
Hang on, Bob.
I think that I'm a very patriotic American, so I don't want America to try to mimic the Habsburg Empire. But there certainly is an American way or an American tradition of making Christianity the moral center of our society. And that is a kind of American tradition of integralism, if you will, that the truths of the faith function not as the principles of our government, but as the integrating center of a healthy society that can sustain our free institutions. That was the premise on which First Things was founded 30 years ago. And, nowadays we think, my goodness, how can we even be heard in this negative world, this hostile environment? And that's what's causing people to think, okay, well, how can we actually do this in 2022?
Bob, I really appreciate it, and partly we laughed a little bit when you asked the question, because we had just spent an hour in this studio, and I've been asking R.R. Reno those very questions, and we'll have that out in a couple weeks on Catholic Answers Focus. So just go to CatholicAnswersFocus.com and subscribe there, and then we'll give you an update when that one is out. I appreciate your American patriotism, but we could use some winged hussars. I mean, the Polish do get some things right. R.R. Reno is the editor of First Things. What a delight to get to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing it with us.
A pleasure to be on Catholic Answers.
You should just, your website for First Things is?
Firstthings.com.
Firstthings.com.
Not complicated.
Go there, sign up, get the journal.
Get 5 subscriptions, one for you and 4 for your friends.
That's the minimum. Get 5 subscriptions. On sale now for the price of 5. All right, coming up next, Jimmy Akin. We're going to take any question you want. It's open forum after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. As promised, Jimmy Akin with us here, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of a whole bunch of things, including The Bible is a Catholic Book. Jimmy Akin, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Cy Kellett.
You ready for a little open forum?
Oh, very ready.
First of all, I want to tell you...
because there's no way to prepare.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Right. Well, you've spent your life preparing, so you're ready in that way.
So to speak.
Do you ever get just a crazy idea? I had this crazy idea last night, and I thought, I bet that film that they shot of Bigfoot, somebody has stabilized that, and I could watch it. And I put it into YouTube, and you can watch the Bigfoot film stabilized. And you know what it looks like? It looks like a guy in a monkey suit.
That's an interesting question.
Is it? Oh, well, you know way more about it than I do, but it looked very...
Well, so the film was taken in the late 1960s. It's known as the Patterson-Gimlin film because of the two guys who filmed it, Patterson and Gimlin. They were out looking for Bigfoot. And the argument that is made by Bigfoot supporters is that when you look at the stabilized footage and when you look at it with high resolution instead of with like a multi-generation faded copy, that you can see that the gait of the creature is not human, and that there are muscles moving under the skin which you would not see if it were just a costume. Yeah. And there's a podcast known as Astonishing Legends that is known for doing ridiculously deep dives. And they did a ridiculously deep dive on the Patterson-Gimlin film a year or two ago. And so if you want like 13 hours of analysis of the Patterson-Gimlin film...
I do now. Yes.
You can listen to the Astonishing Legends discussion of it. And one day we'll talk about that film in more detail on Mysterious World.
I got to say, I'm not thrilled with everything in the modern world, but the fact that if you get an idea in the middle of the night, like, hey, somebody probably stabilized that Bigfoot video, and you can just look at your phone and like, there it is. They did it. That's a great world to live in. I love to live in that kind of world.
Yeah. Instant information gratification.
Exactly. Jimmy Akin is also, of course, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I'm guessing it's probably not Bigfoot tomorrow, but what do you got tomorrow?
Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at Dr. Stephen Greer. He is a medical doctor who claims to be able to telepathically summon extraterrestrials who then show up and appear before him and his group in their UFOs. These are called close encounters of the fifth kind, and he's developed a series of protocols, CE5 protocols, that will allow you to vector in aliens so you can see UFOs kind of on command.
I'm going to start. I have a great deal of suspicion about this. In part because I think I heard you talk about it one time before, and if it's the same guy, I'm like, yeah, I got to watch this.
It'll be a very interesting episode. We present some very interesting evidence regarding whether his claims are true or not.
It's not going to be another one of those weird world ones, though, is it? I'm into the weird world, and then all of a sudden, wait, what?
No,
that was a good one.
It's a self-contained episode. There's no mind-bending twist in the middle of it.
That's what that was a mind-bending twist. Well, here, I got a mind-bending twist I want to ask you about, in part because, Jimmy, everybody is asking us about this, and it seems to be everywhere in the media. This baptism thing that happened in Arizona. A priest apparently... without intending anything malicious, apparently, had been baptizing babies and, well, everyone for years, saying, we baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. The diocese has put out a call to people who were baptized by this to come in and get baptized because they were not. And confirmed or I don't know if they found anyone who had received holy orders, but if they do,
they'd have to get holy orders again too.
Yeah. So that's my two questions are: one, what do we say to the people who are just like in the comments box are saying this is just more Catholic legalism, and then what are the consequences for the people who were not baptized? Like, just what do they got to do now?
Well, so in regard to the first question, the sacraments were founded by Jesus. They were instituted by Jesus. And so as a result, even though there are aspects of them that can change, like in what language do you say the words of baptism?
Right.
You can say it in Spanish, you can say it in English, you can say it in Aramaic. It's all going to be valid because it has the same meaning. But baptism as a sacred rite has meaning. And since it came from Jesus, the church can't alter its meaning. And so if someone comes up with a new baptismal formula, then that is not the one that we find in the Gospel of Matthew, then the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in Rome has to look at it to say, is this changed in meaning enough that it would invalidate the sacrament? Because we don't have control over the meaning of this rite. We can control things like the language in which you say the formula, but we don't control the meaning of the formula. And so out of a kind of sort of loosey-goosey desire to please people and make people feel more involved in the act of baptism, this guy started saying, "We baptize you," instead of "I baptize you." And over in Rome, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith looked at that and said, actually, that's a problem, because it is not the community that baptizes a person. It is Jesus. And Jesus, the priest, is acting in the place of Jesus. There's a fancy Latin phrase for that, in persona Christi, but it means he's doing it on behalf of Jesus. And so this is an act of a person, not a community. And in their judgment, which Pope Francis then approved, and he's not known as a legalist, but Pope Francis approved, as the successor of Peter, this decision. And so that has ripple effects, because everybody who's been loosey-goosey about this and has been using the "we" formula instead of the "I" formula now realizes that they've invalidly baptized a bunch of people. And this is a classic example of why ministers need to actually use the words that are in the church's books. Father Zulsdorf has a catchphrase, "Say the black, do the red." And what that comes from is, if you look in like a Roman missal, the instructions for what to say, the words the priest is supposed to say, are in black, and then the actions the priest is supposed to perform are in red. So they're known as rubrics. And if priests would do their job and say the black and do the red, we wouldn't have problems like this. But some priests have been loosey-goosey about it, and it can cause grave pastoral damage, as in the case of these people. Now, God's grace is not, although we are bound to the sacraments, God's grace is not. So these people have been living Christian lives, they've been striving to please God, and God can still give them his grace apart from the sacraments. But the whole point of God giving us the sacraments were so we would have a definite promise of his grace when we do these rituals that were given to us by Jesus Christ himself. And so because of the invalid baptisms, and because baptism is the gateway to the other sacraments, that means that these people did not properly receive any sacraments that they received after baptism. So they need to go get baptized. They need to be reconfirmed. And if by some chance this guy ordained someone who later became a deacon or a priest, that person's going to need to be reordained.
Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate that. As I said, lots and lots of folks asking about it. It's open forum, though, so you can call with any question you want of Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884. Quick break. Right back with more Jimmy.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The power of prayer simply means that words have an effect. For example, when a couple says, "I do," it literally changes two people to becoming one in marriage. When you say, "I love you," it changes us and it gives us value. The power of prayer is in the words and in the sentiment, but it's also in the fact that God, who is omnipotent, all-powerful, answers our prayers.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest, and it's really an exciting thing around here. We've been planning for this, and now we can talk about it. Jimmy's going to be debating Bart Ehrman on March 24th right here in San Diego. Jimmy, could you tell us a little bit about what this debate is about between you and Bart Ehrman?
Sure. So people may be aware of Bart Ehrman. He's a New Testament scholar from the Carolinas, and he originally was an evangelical. In fact, he would, I believe, describe himself as having been a fundamentalist. But over the course of time, he lost his faith, and he now regards himself as an atheist leaning towards, as an agnostic leaning towards atheism. He's also written a bunch of books in which he questions a bunch of traditional Christian beliefs, including beliefs about the Bible. And so he and I are going to be debating whether the New Testament Gospels are reliable or not. Are they historically reliable? He's going to be saying basically no. I'm going to be saying basically yes. And so it should be a very interesting and productive exchange.
It's going to be live streamed, so people all around the world can watch it. Anybody who wants to can watch it as it's happening. But if you're in the area, or you're going to be in the area, or you just want to be in the area to come, you can get information about how to attend the debate by going to Catholic.com/debate. Just go to Catholic.com/debate and find out all about the March 24th debate, Jimmy Akin, Bart Ehrman, on the reliability of the Gospels. We're going to Keith now in St. Sebastian, Florida, listening on 9:20 a.m. Keith, thanks for waiting. Can you push number 3 for me? I've got a little problem here. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, I've really enjoyed your show. Everything that y'all are saying is right in line with my beliefs, and I was wanting to know how to find, email addresses or any sites or how I could find good people and go to events and meet people. And I don't like to go on Match.com and stuff like that, but it would be nice to meet, really good people that have good hearts that are trying to do things for God. And I did enjoy going to the Monastery of the Holy Spirit when I was 12, and also did a sort of a long thing at Gethsemane, and I really enjoyed it, and it was great when I went.
Can I just ask
you?
Go ahead.
Keith, I need to ask a question. So when you say meet people, you mentioned Match.com, which I believe is a romantically oriented matchmaking site. Are you interested in meeting a woman for romantic purposes, or is it just meeting people in general?
I would love to meet, a good partner, a good wife. I would love to have one. And also I'd like to meet good people that do business and have the desires I have in regards to helping the poor and also making good money, with my state broker's license or whatever, intermingling. And
okay, so you want to meet...
I do travel a lot, too.
Okay. Jimmy?
Okay, so in regard to meeting a romantic partner, there are Catholic dating sites, and I believe Catholic Match is one of them. Catholic Chemistry is another. So you might check those out. In terms of meeting just like-minded people and who are in different places in the country and know what's going on, I would suggest using Facebook, because there are a bunch of Catholic groups on Facebook, including fans of Catholic Answers. If you go to the Catholic Answers Facebook page, there are loads and loads of people that are commenting on the different posts that we put up, and you can get to know those people, and they can help guide you towards different, spiritual efforts and charity efforts and other similar positive, wholesome activities that are taking place in different locations. So I would suggest people these days frequently, you can also always go to your nearest parish or one of the nearer parishes to you and try there. But if you've done that and you aren't meeting the people you'd like to, or if you want to meet people a little more broadly based than just in your local area, it seems to me that going online would be the logical solution. And since Catholic Answers maintains a Facebook page where a lot of like-minded people hang out and interact, that might be a good starting point for you.
As a matter of fact, they're on there right now, Keith, and I'm sure they'd say hello if you stop by the stream of this show on Facebook right now. Thanks, Keith. Jimmy, I have a question from a gentleman who couldn't stay on the line. He's in Sanford, North Carolina. Patrick, he says, I teach confirmation, and I had a student ask this question, and he would like you to answer it so he can answer the student. When God created light, is that also when he created heat?
So this is a question that involves science, because we've got to think about the nature of light and the nature of heat, and then relate that to God's act of creation. In former centuries, the answer would have been that, now we commonly associate light and heat because here on Earth it's warmer in the daytime. The sun not only generates light but also heat, so we tend to associate heat and light together. But they don't always go together. It can be freezing cold outside but still daylight. And so light and heat are two different things. Now, historically, they weren't sure about the nature of light and heat, but there was a view that heat was actually a substance. It was called caloric, and the idea was that caloric will fill up the objects that get warm. So if you have a piece of wood and you hold it near the fire, some of the caloric from the fire will get into the wood and make the wood hot. But the wood does not start glowing as long as it's just hot. So that would indicate there's a difference on this scientific view between light and heat. And so God wouldn't necessarily need to make heat when he made light. Now, subsequently, we've learned that caloric is not the right explanation for what heat is. Instead, heat is the aggregate motion of atoms and molecules. So if you've got a bunch of atoms and molecules in an object and they start jiggling, they start vibrating, the more they vibrate, the more heat we will perceive to be coming off the object. So that's what heat is. It's just vibrating atoms. And the more they vibrate, the hotter something is. So what about light? Well, we have a good understanding of what light is now. Light is basically the same thing as photons. Photons are a kind of subatomic particle, and they carry the electromagnetic force. So when you have a stream of photons and you got enough photons, the human eye will be able to detect it and will perceive it as light. Now, from a scientific perspective, when did these things get created? Well, originally at the Big Bang, so far as we can tell, God, or from a theological point of view, God created all of the energy in the universe at that point. But it was so condensed that it couldn't yet form atoms. It was very chaotic. The energy was really compressed, and it couldn't yet form atoms. And then the universe began expanding, and it took about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, so almost 400,000 years, for the energy density to become low enough that photons could start traveling. And that's the moment that the light first manifested. It was actually about almost 400,000 years after the Big Bang before the universe was big enough for the lights to come on. And then it was some further time for the energy to settle down enough to start forming atoms. And if you define heat in terms of the vibration of atoms, the advent of heat would have come even after the advent of light. So at least if you define heat in terms of atoms vibrating, then you can't have heat until you've got atoms, and you've got atoms forming after the lights turned on. So I would say no. Based on our present scientific understanding, God would have created the energy that the world is made out of, but it would have taken a while for the light to manifest, and then it would have taken a while longer for heat to manifest. Although as soon as you have atoms, they're really shaking around in that high energy state. So the atoms started quite hot.
Patrick, thank you for that question. Thank you also that you're teaching the confirmation class. God bless you for that. I'd love to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book, just to say thanks for all that you do. But you're going to have to send me an email because I know that we don't have you on the line. So if you hear this later, shoot us an email, radio@catholic.com, and we'll send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. It's open forum. Going now to Houston, Texas. Henry in Houston, Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Henry, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Mr. Akin. Thank you for having me. My question is it's about matter and form in the sacraments. So, like at the beginning with the priest who baptized people, and we baptize you. And I know some words are maybe more important than others, like especially in the sacrament of confession. Like some priests will say, I absolve you from all your sins, which is not the correct form. It's I absolve you from your sins. Is a word like all in the words of absolution, is that also enough to make it invalid?
It's not enough to make it invalid because the fundamental meaning is the same. If a priest says, I absolve you of your sins, he doesn't mean just some of them. He means any sins you have. So he is absolving you of all of your sins, whether he uses the word all or not. So the meaning is preserved in that case. However, priests have an obligation to say the black and do the red. And it does not say to use the word all here. And if you start tampering with the formula, it will confuse and potentially alarm the faithful. Hence, you have your own question. Is this going to be valid? Because he's not using the formula that it says he should be using in the book. That's going to cause puzzlement. And I understand why priests try to do this, because they think, oh, if I include the word all, it's going to make it even more powerful for the penitent to hear that all of his sins are forgiven. It'll make it more emotively effective for him. Well, the priest's job is not to vary from the approved text in order to make things more emotionally effective. And you run the risk of scandalizing the penitent and making the penitent worry about whether this was valid or not. Because if people hear priests using unapproved formulas, if they're alert about their faith, they're going to worry, is that really valid? And so it will make the absolution illicit, meaning it's not in conformity with the church's liturgical law for a priest to do that. But since it doesn't alter meaning, it will not make it invalid. The absolution will still work.
Okay, Henry? All right, I'm going to guess that that's okay with Henry. He's very quiet. He's still there on the line. But thanks, Henry. Appreciate it. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Father Michael in Effingham, Illinois, listening on Catholic.com, is up. Am I right? Is it Father Michael?
That's right.
All right, Father, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right, awesome. Thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it. You guys are great.
Well, thank you.
You guys are really awesome, man. Really, I'm on Catholic.com all the time. Anyway, I am teaching religion at a Catholic high school, and I have a question that I want to hear your thoughts on. Okay, now in terms of same-sex attraction, the common understanding, by the way, high schoolers are like really, these are like the kind of the toughest questions you could think of, is what they want to know about. So in terms of same-sex attraction, the common understanding is that your attraction is not your choice, but it is instead nature, less nurture. That's kind of the common understanding of the world at large. And faith and science are not opposed, as we know, but the science continues to suggest, at least in the circles that I read or what I've heard, that same-sex attraction is actually not nature. That is, it is not written on our DNA, but that it is actually more of a result of nurture, as it were. That's just kind of what the science suggests, okay? Mm-hmm. Where are any of your likes or inclinations on your DNA? Like, someone could say, well, the fact that I'm inclined to be a writer, or I like basketball as opposed to football, or I like fishing is not written on my DNA either, one could say. So you can't say that attraction to the same sex or opposite sex is written on my DNA either.
Well, Father, you can probably hear the music. We got to take a quick break. We'll get Jimmy's answer right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Matt Swaim here. Tomorrow on the Sunrise Morning Show, we'll celebrate the feast of Blessed Fra Angelico, patron saint of artists, and get a preview of the Sunday Mass readings. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Sarah, have I told you what a good job you do running the soundboard? Nice going with the groovy music. Thanks very much. You hit Reno with the groovy music first hour. Jimmy gets his dose of groovy music second hour. Nice job, Sarah. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And on the line is Father Michael in Illinois, asking, especially because he teaches teenagers, about the arguments for same-sex attraction being in the DNA, and Father was thinking of, well, what about our other attractions? Would those be in the DNA as well? Jimmy?
So the humans are, by Aristotle's definition, rational animals. And so we have an animal nature, including our genetics, but then we're also highly cognitive. So we can learn and adapt ourselves to stuff. And frequently, you will hear people say things like, well, same-sex attraction is not chosen, by the people who have it. They don't say, oh, I want to have same-sex attraction. They just find themselves experiencing it. And so it must be genetic rather than a choice. Well, I agree that it's not just a choice, but there are other alternatives besides conceptually, you want to think through the problem space. There are other alternatives besides genetics, because people have attractions to other things that are clearly learned. For example, or aversions to things. An aversion that is clearly learned is how most Americans do not like the idea of eating dog. Okay?
Right.
Most Americans are averse to eating dog. But that's not biological. That is learned. And you can show that because studies of children indicate that early on, children will put just about anything in their mouth. Parents see this all the time. I'm sure you remember when your kids were in this stage and they would just put anything into their mouth.
Yes.
And what children do is they learn which foods are safe to eat based on their parents. And the reason they do that is because a child genetically does not know in what part of the world it's going to be born. It could be born anywhere, and it doesn't know what foods will be available locally or which local things are safe to eat. And so the strategy evolutionarily for humans is to be open to eating anything, since we're omnivores. And then you wait a while to learn which of the foods we eat here based on what your parents are feeding you. And then at a certain age, that willingness to eat anything slams shut, and kids become incredibly picky eaters because now they have identified which are the correct foods to eat in this location, and refusing to eat things that aren't on the list will protect them from getting poisoned or food toxins or whatever it may be. And so that's why kids go from being super willing to eat anything to super unwilling to eat anything they're not used to. And here in America, kids don't eat dog when they're in that early training window. And so even though in other countries, they the Koreas, they may eat dog in that early training period. And so the idea of eating dog is natural to them. But it is here in America, the aversion to eating dog is learned. It's learned from the fact that the kids don't eat it during the training period. And if you asked a person, so did you choose to have an aversion to eating dog? The person would say, no, I just don't want to eat dog. I didn't choose that. I just I just find it revolting. Right. And that's a learned response. So we can learn things that we don't have any memory of choosing. Because it wasn't a conscious choice at some moment in life, I'm going to find dog meat disgusting. But it's also not genetic that we find dog meat disgusting, because some humans eat it just fine. Well, that alerts us to the possibility that same-sex attraction could be in this other category, or it may have elements of this other category where it is learned even though it's not a conscious choice. And I could give examples. This is a family show, so I won't, but I could give examples of other things that people find themselves attracted to that are clearly not genetic, because these things did not exist in the ancient world. Like if someone has an attraction to high heels something, or a particular style of lingerie, well, those didn't exist in the ancient world, so there's no way that's genetic. But and thus it would suggest that kind of attraction is learned, even though no one remembers choosing, I'm going to find this style of lingerie really attractive. Yeah. So that means we've got an open field here in terms of what's the origin of same-sex attraction. Now, I should say because Father Michael was asking about other attractions, and some of them are genetic. The reason that humans find carbohydrates, and especially sugars, pleasant to eat is genetic. That's built into us on a genetic level. We're born with the right taste buds on our tongues to detect sugar, like in honey as a natural form of sugar, or in fruits. And because our bodies can digest sugars, and because they are a good source of energy for us, sugars are calorie dense. We are naturally attracted to sweet things, and that is genetic. That is a genetically based like. It's not just a learned like. On the other hand, cats do not have that. Cats do not have not evolved to eat fruit, and they're obligate carnivores. They can only eat meat naturally. And I mean, you can feed them whatever artificial thing you've got, but naturally they are obligate carnivores. They can't digest the sugars the way we can, so they don't even have the taste buds for them. So if you feed a dog a sweet treat, the dog may like it because they're omnivores like us. Cats are not. Cats will not care about sweetness. So some things are definite. Some likes and attractions are definitely genetic. Others are not. What about when it comes to reproduction? Well, all biological organisms have a drive to reproduce. That's what drives evolution forward. It's what keeps the species in existence. If people didn't have a genetic predisposition to try to reproduce, then a species would just die. So there is some kind of reproduction-related attraction in us that is definitely hardwired and will be found in our genes. But that doesn't mean it can't be overridden by learning experiences. That also doesn't mean that there can't be genes that would predispose one to same-sex attraction, because in any mind as complex as the ones humans have, multiple genes are playing roles, and so it's possible that some genes might predispose one towards same-sex attraction, just like some genes might predispose one towards depression or alcoholism or drug abuse. That doesn't mean we should indulge those predispositions. On the other hand, we really don't have a good scientific explanation for the origin of same-sex attraction at this point, because the science is so polarized. Now, ultimately, we're learning more about the influence of genes on human behavior, and so in the future, we're likely to have a much better answer on the origin of same-sex attraction than we do right now. But right now, the science is very polarized. You have people who advocate on one side, and you have people who advocate on another side, and the science is not settled on this at this point. We need more research, and so the Catechism has said, fairly honestly, that the origin of same-sex attraction is not clear at this point. It may have genetic components, it may have learned components, it may have both.
Father Michael, I'm going to say thanks for the call. As well, we're a short time and lots of callers, so I got to move on.
By the way,
yeah.
In addition, I should mention it can have, in addition to genetic and learned causes, it can also have congenital causes, which are things that are not genetic, but that might happen in the womb. That can also influence things.
I got to leave that there. Father Michael, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more calls and questions for Jimmy Akin, Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Isn't it awesome that we today do not recognize His presence?
in the Eucharist? Is it because we really don't go to him in humbleness of heart and say, Lord, I don't believe, help my unbelief. Lord, I want to see you. I want to recognize you. I cannot live without you. Are we saying that?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest, open forum, every line full. So I'm going to just keep making Jimmy work. Let's go to Philip in Quebec, Canada, listening on Catholic Answers Live. Glad to have you, Philip. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so under the New Covenant, we don't have any more animal sacrifice and things like burnt offerings. My question is, in the Old Covenant, in Jeremiah 33, we say that the priests will forever sacrifice and do grain offerings and burnt offerings. How do we reconcile this eternal covenant made in the Old Testament with our understanding of the New Covenant?
Okay, well, I guess there are a couple of interlocking issues here. The first one is the Levitical priesthood was never understood as the only priesthood there is to be. The Levitical priesthood was a priesthood that God created for the Jewish people, but they never imagined that the Levitical priests were the only priests there were. They weren't even the only priests that worshiped God. Now, obviously, the Egyptians had their priests, and the Babylonians had their priests, and they were worshiping pagan gods, but there were other priests that worshiped the true God, like Melchizedek, who was a Jebusite, he was a priest, but he was a priest of God Most High. So he was worshiping the true God. Also, we have Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, and we're told Jethro is a priest of Midian, and he also worships God. And so other priests could sacrifice to God. And in fact, there's been a discussion about, like, what if you have a Gentile today who wants to offer a sacrifice to God? You know, he wants to, like, get a sheep and sacrifice it. Is that okay? And the conclusion that the rabbis came to is yes, it is. Because Jewish priests are bound to sacrifice only at the temple in Jerusalem. And since there is no temple in Jerusalem right now, they can't sacrifice. But Gentiles are not subject to the law of Moses. And so if a Gentile wants to take a sheep and whip out a knife and sacrifice it to God, from a Jewish point of view, that's okay, because the Gentile doesn't have to do this at Jerusalem. And in fact, they concluded that it would be okay for Jewish scholars to train Gentiles who wanted to do this in how to correctly sacrifice to God based on the principles in the Old Testament and in rabbinic tradition. So even though they can't implement these things right now because they don't have a temple, Gentiles could do it because they're not bound to observe the Mosaic Law. So the Mosaic Law does not presuppose that there is only one priesthood. And as a result, the New Testament, and this is most thoroughly dealt with in the book of Hebrews. So Hebrews is really where you want to go to get a lengthier treatment of it. But Hebrews identifies Jesus not as a member of a changed Levitical priesthood, but as a member of a different priesthood altogether. The language that Hebrews uses based on the Psalms is that Jesus is a priest on the order of Melchizedek. And a lot of people have looked at that word order and said, oh, that means there's a specific order of priests, like the Levitical order of priests, that goes back to Melchizedek, and Jesus was a member of that order. But I think that's reading a modern meaning onto the text. If I said, I need to go down to the store and pick up some eggs, and you said how many, I might say, on the order of a dozen. Have I just said or asserted that there is a like a priestly order of eggs that I'm going to be purchasing from?
I would say no way, Jimmy. No
exactly. So order means other things, and it can mean things like just like or similar to.
Yeah.
And I think what the author of Hebrews is saying is Jesus is a non-Levitical priest, like Melchizedek is a non-Levitical priest. And so he's showing that it's okay for Jesus to be a priest, even though he's not a Levite. What then about the status of the Levitical priests? Well, we do have some statements in the Old Testament, like Philip mentioned one in Jeremiah, talking about the Levitical priesthood being eternal. Well, okay, that's obviously a translation from Hebrew. What's the original Hebrew word? Now, I haven't looked up the passage that he mentioned, but the usual Hebrew word that gets translated eternal in English is olam. And olam can mean eternal, but it can also mean other things like for an age or indefinitely into the future. And so it doesn't require the strict meaning of forever and ever, amen. And I would say that that's what we see here. The Levitical priesthood was commissioned to act indefinitely into the future, but eventually there was a new covenant that was made, and the new covenant had a new priesthood based on Jesus, who, like Melchizedek, was not a Levite but was a priest. And the book of Hebrews also talks about the former covenant and its rights being old and near to passing away. And that's actually a sign that Hebrews likely was written during the Jewish war that led to the destruction of the temple, just as Jesus had prophesied. And so since the temple has been destroyed, and since that was a prophecy of Christ, representing God's will for the temple to pass away and Jesus to become our new temple, that indicates that God has made a decision that the sacrificing of the Levitical priesthood is to end, and the Christian system is to flourish. Now, that would then point us in the direction of not taking the term olam or parallel terms in the absolute sense of this absolutely has to continue infinitely into the future, but just that the Levitical priesthood was appointed by God for an age that stretched indefinitely into the future, but now we're past that age because of God's decision to end the temple sacrifices in Jerusalem and thus end the sacrificing of the Levitical priesthood. Hope that helps.
I do too, Philip. I'm going to keep moving because got lots and lots of folks on the line, but we're going to stay in Canada. Nate in Toronto, Canada, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Nate, with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, hi. So I was just asking some more information about St. Joseph because I've been researching and I haven't been able to find any biblical like statements or anything about how he died, but he's like a saint. He's a part of the Holy Family. So I just found that odd. I don't know if you guys are hearing me right now.
Yeah, no, we're hearing you. So what would you like from Jimmy? Some information on St. Joseph?
Where can I find some information about like St. Joseph's death, his life? Because I can't find it in the Bible.
We don't have, and you're right, the Bible doesn't address it. We don't have any reliable early sources that talk about St. Joseph's death. There are going to be some mentions of it in some of the literature in the second and following centuries, but those are written hundreds of years after his life, and they are primarily works of Christian imagination rather than historically reliable things that have a chain of tradition, of accurate historical tradition going all the way back to the 1st century. We can infer that Joseph died sometime between when Jesus was 12, because he is present at the finding of the temple in Luke chapter 2. So we know he survived until Jesus was 12, but he's apparently gone, no longer living, by the time of Jesus' adult ministry, because Jesus has to entrust Mary to the beloved disciple at the crucifixion, whereas if Joseph was alive, she'd just go home and be with her husband. So sometime between 12 and 33, St. Joseph apparently passed away, but we're really not given data about that, either in the New Testament or afterwards. Like I said, you will find accounts of St. Joseph's death in some early Christian writings, but they are really to be regarded as works of Christian imagination rather than being historically accurate. So in terms of actual history, we have to kind of be willing to live with uncertainty here about exactly how he passed on.
I hope that's helpful. Nate, thank you very much for the call. Going to keep moving. Got to get as many on as I can with Jimmy. Going to go to Louisiana now. Kathy in Louisiana, listening on the smart speaker to Iowa Catholic Radio. Glad to have you, Kathy. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So your discussion about the invalid baptisms in Arizona prompted me to call with this question. I was present at a baptism where the child being baptized only had the water poured to where it only touched his hair and never touched his skin or scalp. And I want to know if that is valid.
As far as I'm aware, the Holy See hasn't issued a ruling on this question, and that puts it in the realm of theological opinion among sacramental scholars. And I can see arguments both ways on this. It is uncertain enough in my mind that I would say that a baptism where the water only touches the hair is of doubtful validity. To my mind, it wouldn't be certainly invalid or certainly valid. It would be doubtful. And priests have a responsibility to say the black and do the red. And in the red, it says pour water on the head, not on the hair, or immerse for baptism. So you can either pour water on the head or you can do a full immersion. And it doesn't matter whether it's a baby. You can perfectly well dunk babies. Eastern Orthodox do that, and various Eastern Catholics do that all the time. But I would say this is another example of a priest getting loosey-goosey if he's not getting the child clearly wet. And it's going to do exactly what it has done, Kathy, which is make you wonder about, was this baptism valid? I think every priest and deacon and anybody else who baptizes somebody needs to get the person well and truly wet so that there is no doubt about this issue. Now, having said that, I think that the odds are that the child was validly baptized, because even though the water appeared to only make contact with the hair, in reality, some drops of it may have gotten onto the scalp and or the skin and flowed, and that would be, even if they were small drops, that would be sufficient for it to be valid. So I think that the child is probably valid, but I have to say, if this is actually what happened, then it would, and it really only got on the hair, then it would seem to be doubtful validity to me.
Kathy, sorry, but we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Cynthia in Houston, Texas, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Channel 130. Cynthia, if you'd like an answer, you got to be quick.
Hi, it will be quick. This is just in a response to some previous question that Jimmy just answered. It was about whether or not if a priest says, I absolve you of all your sins, it's the same as absolve you of, just absolve you. And Jimmy said, it doesn't matter because either way, the priest absolves you of all your sins at the end of confession. And I'm very much paraphrasing. But I'm pretty much under the understanding that if you don't confess a mortal sin, then that confession is invalid. And so he's not absolving you of all of your sins unless you confess it. So I don't know if you can just expand on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's true. If you deliberately hold back a mortal sin that you know you're obliged to confess, so you're knowingly and deliberately refusing to do your part by confessing all the mortal sins to the best of your ability, then yeah, it's going to be invalid. But that doesn't affect the meaning of the formula. What he's trying to do, priest doesn't know you held something back deliberately. What the priest is trying to do is absolve you of all of your sins whether he uses the word all or not. That's what he's trying to do. Whether he succeeds in absolving you of all of your sins will depend on whether you've done your part in confession.
Cynthia, thanks very much. You were quick with that. Jimmy Akin, thank you very much. We'll see you again tomorrow for 2 hours of Bible questions.
Yeah, how about that? Look forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. So bring your Bible questions tomorrow. Jimmy Akin will be here. If you want to know more about that debate between Jimmy and Bart Ehrman coming up March 24th, go to Catholic.com/debate. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.